Hi guys, welcome back or welcome to Switch to Life. And today we're going to be reviewing the first Pixar-based TV show, Monsters at Work, a spin-off and sequel series to Monsters, Inc. Now, to be honest, I actually really enjoyed this series, and it seems like a lot of other people did. But one thing that you have to keep in mind, this series was not actually made by Pixar, it was made by Disney Television Animation. But despite that, it's still really good, and I think that they are pretty faithful to the original story. Granted, there are a few animation errors, but that's kind of expected, especially when it comes to TV shows, especially one as high budget as this one. While it doesn't look anywhere as good as Monsters University, it looks slightly better than Monsters, Inc., but that's just due to a 20-year gap and the fact that Monsters, Inc. animation is aged. And to be honest, the animation in Monsters at Work isn't as fluid as it was in the original movie. But as much as I hate to admit it, the animation in this TV show is much better than Megamind 2, which is really saying something. Along with this, there's the voice casting, which I gotta admit, I really enjoyed. Especially because despite it being over 20 years since the original movie, they brought back a lot of the actors from the original films, including, but not limited to, Mike, Sully, Roz, Johnny Worthington, Chet, Adorable, who is the Abominable Snowman, but he changed his name, and then they brought back Celia's May's voice actress for season 1, but they had to replace her for season 2 due to scheduling conflicts. And they brought back a bunch of other returning characters, some of whom are voiced by their movie actors, but there are plenty who had to be replaced. I also really enjoyed the voice actors for a lot of the newer characters who are really good. And then, of course, there's the music for this series, which I will admit some of it is taken from the movie, but it has plenty of its own brand new original music that is really good. Not as iconic, but that might just be nostalgia for me. And then, of course, there's the actual story, which I really enjoyed, and honestly, it's kind of a story that could only be told in the form of a TV show. They couldn't turn this into a movie, so I'm really glad that they decided to go with that route. So, remember how I said that Mike and Sully are going to be main characters in this series as they appear in almost every episode? Well, they're not the main characters. The main character is actually Tyler Tuskman, who is a graduate from Monsters University that just got a job as a scarer right as Monsters, Inc. went to Laugh Power, which means that if he can't make a kid laugh, he can't be a jokester and thus be on the laugh floor, which is kind of his dream job. So, instead of scaring kids, he has to learn to make kids laugh. And until he can, he has to report to MIFT, which is the Monsters, Inc. facilities team, who are actually the monsters behind the monsters. They make sure that the equipment runs smoothly, and if it breaks down, they're the ones who fix it. The reason that happens is because Tyler's dad owns a hardware store, and they saved up all their money so that Tyler could actually go to Monsters University. Anyway, so we have some interesting characters who are part of the Monsters, Inc. facilities team. Among them, we have the team leader, Fritz, who is a really optimistic and friendly guy who just wants to be a father figure to pretty much everybody around him, especially his employees. And then, of course, there's Duncan. He is actually a deputy supervisor for Fritz, and he wants Fritz's job as the guy in charge of MIFT, and that's kind of his whole character. He will bite you in the back if it means that he is one step closer to getting Fritz's job. And then there's Cutter. Now, what's really interesting about Cutter is that she is kind of lazy, and she will never hesitate to drop what she's doing to go on her lunch break. However, she is still reliable, and what's really weird about her is that she loves violence. She loves it when people get injured, oftentimes keeping their body parts as a souvenir when they die.
It's not an it, kid. It's Klaus.
And then there's Val Little, who is weirdly optimistic to the point where it's actually super annoying. Now, to provide some backstory, both Tyler and Val Little went to college together at Monsters University, but Tyler doesn't remember much of it because, well, they only had the one conversation, not to mention the fact that Val actually quit Monsters University after just one semester, while Tyler stayed for all 4 years until he graduated. Which is actually kind of weird because despite only having one conversation, it was super meaningful to Val, not so much to Tyler, but since then, Val has seen Tyler as her best friend, despite spending all these years apart, and now they're reunited as work buddies. Anyway, let's move on to the story. So in episode 1, everything kind of changed. This is the first day where Monsters, Inc. is transferring from scare power to laugh power, and Mike Wazowski and Sully are made the CEOs of Monsters Incorporated after Henry J. Waternoose, the villain of the first movie, was sent to prison. So, scarers are now forced to be funny, and if they can't be funny, they will either be reassigned or fired. Or some of them might even quit to go work at other electric companies who are still using scaring to power the city. Among them is, again, Tyler, who, despite this being his first day of being a scarer, is reassigned to Myth despite not even stepping onto the scare floor. Granted, he does try to make a kid laugh, but that ends up in disaster to the point where they now have a dead door. And of course, then Mike and Sully try to give a few words of inspiration because even though Tyler messed up, it's a very chaotic day for everybody. Everyone's gonna mess up because this is all brand new territory. No one knows how it's gonna work. And this is kind of a thing that's going to take months, not just happen in a matter of days. And that's really cool that they acknowledge that. And honestly, it explains why this is a TV show and not just a movie. So, in the second episode, Tyler is back on the job as a Mifter, and the Mift try to make him feel welcome and help him out, but unfortunately, he's just trying to find a way to avoid them at all costs so that he can just get onto the scare floor and try to learn to be funny. And then there's a power outage, which causes a system malfunction that requires Miff to go out there and fix some equipment, and Tyler gets the chance to prove his hardware skills when he wrenches the nut, and since then he has become an official Mifter. In episode 3, a monster named Flem actually ends up damaging a kid's room, so now while Mike Wazowski has to take care of the human kid, the Mifters try to fix the damaged room. And this leads to a heart-to-heart between Val and Tyler. And Mike has to take care of the human kid, who he calls Snore, which is actually kind of funny because...
You told me once that if you name it,
you start getting attached to it, and no, this is different.
How?
I just can't call it thing.
He's kind of against the whole idea that monsters are supposed to take care of human kids, especially after the whole Boo fiasco. Then in episode 4, the monsters go bowling. Literally, it's just an episode dedicated to bowling.
How did you get stuck in the ball return?
Bowling. It's in my blood. I say to myself, Mike, you're the ball. Be the ball. So, I was the ball.
And then in episode 5, Fritz decides to go on vacation, so he needs to pick one of his employees to become temporary supervisor. And despite a Wheel of Fortune choosing Val, she ends up giving the position to Duncan because he kind of guilt trips her. And then there's a bunch of problems where Duncan and Tyler end up causing another power outage, which causes Merc, who is like the company in charge of electric companies, to check out what the issue is and see if there needs to be a change in leadership, change in employee, or have the entire company shut down. After discovering the cause of the problem, the Merc official requests that Duncan be fired, until Duncan ends up kidnapping the Merc official and sending him through the vacation door, where they spend the next 2 weeks, and then when they come back, the Merc official, feeling a little bit more relaxed, decides to just write them up, despite essentially kidnapping them and giving them a forced vacation. But at least it's just a warning, and now Duncan isn't going to get fired.
You have shown that you're willing to sacrifice one another.
Sacrifice for one another?
That too!
In episode 6, Tyler accidentally breaks the vending machine, which actually offers Fritz's favorite drink, Drooler Coolers, and it doesn't help that morale is low across the entire company, which makes it hard for the jokesters to be happy and make a kid laugh, which also causes profits to be really low, and thus some budget cuts are happening, which means that Fritz might have to fire one of his employees, along with a bunch of other employees who are being let go. Having a conversation with Val Little, Mike Wazowski overhears Tyler complaining about the vending machine being broken, and thus he comes up with the idea of upgrades. If he upgrades all of the stuff in the facility, this will cause morale to boost, which will cause laughter to boost, which will cause profits to boost, which means that it's a win-win for everybody. So he makes some excessive spending on a bunch of projects, including a brand new vending machine, as well as a foosball table, art pieces that are super expensive, and even a rooftop swimming pool, which nobody uses, but still, it's really excessive spending. I guess that's kind of the perk of being an overpaid CEO. Anyway, while all that is happening, Fritz is trying out the new vending machine and he falls in love with it, but then Tyler and Duncan both end up breaking it, and when Duncan tries to fix it, he removes some doohickeys, which you are never supposed to remove because that causes the machine to go haywire, and thus it becomes a killing machine. So Tyler is forced to do what he does best as a mifter and break the machine. And he does so, which causes the old vending machine to be repaired and then sent in instead of this new machine. But in the process of Mike's excessive spending, his plan actually works. Morale is up, which means laughter is up, which means profits are up, which means no more budget cuts, and power is provided to the city, which means Fritz doesn't have to fire an employee anymore. And that's good because he was about to announce his retirement, which is really sad for Duncan because, again, he still wants Fritz's job. On to episode 7, where it's the hottest day of the year and Monstropolis is using a lot of energy to power their cooling systems, which means Monsters, Inc. needs to provide a lot more energy than they usually do. So now they can no longer rely on official jokesters, they have to rely on the students of Mike's comedy class, which is actually a really fun film series that you can go watch on YouTube. It's only 8 minutes long and really funny. Definitely worth watching. Anyway, the college comedy student who can provide the most energy will be upgraded to official jokester, which means Tyler Tuskman has a chance to become an official jokester. But unfortunately, due to mechanical failure, he has to report to MIFT, and this eventually leads to a problem where he ends up through the banishment door and he comes face to face with the Abominable Snowman, who, again, is trying to change his name to the Adorable Snowman. Now, what's interesting about the Adorable Snowman is that he's a banished monster, which means that when Tyler comes back to Monsters, Inc., he ends up bringing Adorable with him, and that can be a lot of trouble because that means he just broke an official law. So, Tyler has to find some way to get Adorable back through the banishment door, at which point Val Little is trying to discover why Adorable was even banished to begin with, and they make the discovery that the only reason Adorable was banished was because he discovered the Scream Extractor. He never actually did anything wrong. All he did was discover the villain's plot. That's the only reason he was banished. So, unfortunately, Tyler ends up giving away his chance to become an official jokester in order to bring Abominable back to Monsters, Inc. and have Mike and Sully pardon him for his crimes, of which there aren't even any to begin with. And thus Adorable becomes Monsters, Inc.'s new snow cone vendor. In episode 8, we learn that for the past few months, Tyler has been auditioning so hard to become an official jokester, but after so many auditions, Miss Flynn has decided that this will be his last one and that he will never become an official jokester. Shortly after, we learn that it's Mini Monster Day, where a bunch of little kids are given the chance to explore the factory alongside learning from the actual employees themselves, and they get to tag along with one of the employees. And this is when Tyler realizes that one of the kids is actually Miss Flynn's daughter. And if he can actually find a way to make her laugh, he thinks that she will actually find a way to convince her mom to go and make him an official jokester. and this is his last desperate attempt. So throughout the day, despite trying to be a good mifter, he's also trying to find ways to make Talia, who is Miss Flynn's daughter, laugh, and it fails miserably every single time, to the point where Tyler is so frustrated that he straight up tells Talia to go tell her mother that she is super unfunny and wouldn't know comedy if it hit her in the face. Of course, that's really bad, so he tries to get Talia to stop, but in the process, he ends up causing chaos to the point where he crashes into the donut cart, and donuts fall all over his horns, and for some reason, he actually makes Talia laugh. And then Tyler reveals what he was trying to do the whole time, at which point Talia says that she knew what he was doing, as a bunch of other monsters have done it before. But she's really proud because he is the first monster to actually admit what he was doing. So when Mini Monster Day is over and Miss Flynn picks up her daughter, she actually ends up saying that Tyler is actually really funny and deserves a chance to actually be an official jokester.
We'd have you do more, but we learned last year about a thing called child labor laws.
Anyway, let's move on to episode 9 and forget about that plot point for just a second. In this episode, Tyler is so depressed as he's given up all hope that he's ever going to be a jokester, but he decides to turn it all around and become the best mifter that he can be, which is actually kind of convenient because today is David Day, which is honoring the death of one of the best mifters ever, David, who ended up being a really great mifter, but unfortunately died in a shredder shaft a couple years ago.
No more David.
And now he has a holiday where everybody celebrates his legacy as the best employee anyone could ever ask for, which causes Tyler to have a legacy to actually live up to, and he tries, but he ends up failing when he tries to feed Duncan's pet, Roto.
Pet? He's my emotional support animal.
So Roto ends up escaping his cage, and he actually ends up eating David's hair, which is the body part that Cutter used to commemorate his legacy. So now he has to not only track down Roto, but far more importantly, find a way to replace David's hair. And he does this by asking Rose, who also has pink hair. Side note, Rose is actually Roz's supposed twin sister.
You're her, she's you. You just changed sweaters and hair color. Two monsters can't have the same bad breath. Reveal your true identity.
Of course, at first she says no, but then Tyler decides to find a way to track down David's hair by going to the shredder shaft where he was killed, and thus he almost dies himself, even having a bit of a vision where he ends up going to Heaven's Gates, despite not actually dying, and then he actually meets the ghost of David. Again, I'm pretty sure that's all fake. And somehow he ends up catching Roto when he wakes up. Now, that is actually the stupidest way to catch an animal. Just, you wake up and you find him in your hand. That is so stupid. Anyway, Rose decides to actually give Tyler a lock of her hair, despite it not coming from her head. I don't want to know where it came from. Unfortunately, the rest of the Miffed employees figure out that something is wrong with the hair, at which point Tyler comes clean about the whole mess, and they actually forgive him because he was actually trying to be a reliable employee, and there's nothing more reliable than telling the truth. On to episode 10, which I believe was the perfect finale for season 1. We learned that Merc is actually concerned about Monsters, Inc. supplying enough power and laugh power actually being reliable, at which point they decide that the only way to save Monsters, Inc. is for Monsters, Inc. to generate 1 million gigawatts in one day, which is a feat that they've never done before. Now, if we back up to episode 8, where Miss Flynn realizes that Tyler is actually funny and ended up making her daughter laugh, Miss Flynn tells Tyler that he actually has a shot of becoming a jokester if he helps them hit 1 million gigawatts. So at this point, Tyler has actually made a lot of friends in Myth, so he's not really too happy about the fact that he's being promoted to Jokester. Obviously, it's what he's wanted the entire season, but he's also sad because it means saying goodbye to his friends. So Tyler decides to have a one-day basis of being a jokester, at which point he will go back to being a full-time mifter, and then he also comes up with a brilliant idea where, since laughter power is 10 times more powerful than scream energy, they need bigger canisters, so he has Cutter make a prototype of what one of these big canisters will look like. And that's not the only thing that he's actually done for the Monsters, Inc. company as a whole. He also came up with the new slogan, "It's laughter we're after," instead of the old slogan, "We scare because we care." Anyway, Tyler actually confesses his feelings and a heart-to-heart with Sully, and he actually says that, "I just wish we could go back to scaring so that we could both do what we were meant to do and be the best version of us we could be." At which point Sully says that he doesn't actually want to be a scarer because there's just something about the way that he saw the look of fear on Boo's face when he scared her. I actually really loved this scene because it showed why Sully and Mike Wazowski are so insistent that they switch to laugh power instead of reverting to scare power, which is a proved and tried method, while in laugh power they're still trying to figure out the kinks. So, after a successful day of hitting 1 million gigawatts, Mike and Sully make Tyler the last official jokester, filling up that last spot after Val Little becomes his temporary floor assistant. Now, at first, Tyler actually tries to turn down the promotion, but then his friends pull him over and say that they're supportive of his decision, especially because it's really weird. Throughout the entire season, they've been trying to welcome him into Myth and trying to make him forget his dream of being a jokester. But after seeing how much it actually means to him and how much he actually cares about it, once he's given the chance, they fully support him, even though it might mean saying goodbye. They also support Val Little when she decides to become a full-on floor assistant to Tyler, and thus Myth ends up losing 2 of their best employees at the end of the season, but they're happy for those employees because they're getting the chance to live out their dreams. And thus comes the end of the first season. Okay, so believe it or not, I actually wanted to make the entire series into just one video, but I guess I had more to say about each individual season that it kind of warrants their own videos. So today is going to be part 1, and this Friday I hope to upload part 2, which will focus on season 2. With that in mind, I am really happy with what we got in season 1. Granted, I do wish we could have gotten a bit more screen time with Mike and Sully, but they had plenty that they were relevant throughout the series, unlike Celia, who was kind of just there. Also, at the end of the season, they literally have the exact same scene that's at the end of the first movie, but I'm kind of wondering, why couldn't they just pull the audio directly from the movie? I get that they might have to reanimate some stuff, but they should have at least had the lines be delivered the exact same way, and they didn't. Anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed today's video. Please make sure to subscribe so you can keep up to date on all things DreamWorks, as this is a mostly DreamWorks focused channel. And more importantly, you'll get a notification when I upload part 2, where I review season 2 of Monsters at Work. With that in mind, I hope that you're staying safe out there, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye-bye.
Okay, who's next? Yikes! Okay, big guy. How about a smile? Maybe you're more of a knock-knock joke kind of guy?